Hello, my friends. I hope you all are doing well. Today's topic is Muammar Gaddafi. He rose from the desert, from a poor tent under the open skies of Libya, to rule a nation for 42 years. Muammar Gaddafi, a man both loved and feared. A revolutionary who promised freedom, justice, and prosperity. A leader who gave his people free electricity, health care, and homes. He turned Libya into one of the richest countries in Africa. But beneath that success was a darker side. He silenced his enemies, ruled with an iron fist, built prisons for voices that dared to speak the truth. Some called him a visionary, others a dictator. To the West, he was dangerous. To many Africans, he was a symbol of resistance. To Libyans, he was both a provider and a punisher. He made bold decisions, took dangerous risks, and ultimately, it was those same decisions that led to his fall. In the end, the man who once ruled with power and pride was dragged through the streets by his own people. He died in the same city he was born, Sirte. But this time, not as a hero, not as a king, but as a broken man. This is not just a political story. This is a lesson about leadership, pride, and how power can destroy everything if not handled with humility. This is the rise and fall of Muammar Gaddafi. So I have divided the entire life of Muammar Gaddafi into 7 chapters. Now let's move towards those chapters. Chapter 1. From the Desert. Muammar Gaddafi was born in 1942 in the desert of Sirte, Libya. He didn't grow up in a palace. He wasn't born into power. He came from a poor Bedouin family living in a simple tent. No electricity, no running water, just the burning sun, the sand, and endless struggle. As a young boy, Gaddafi watched his people suffer. Libya was under the rule of King Idris, a monarch closely tied to the West. Foreign companies controlled the oil. The rich lived in luxury, while most Libyans lived in poverty. These images burned deep into Gaddafi's heart. He dreamed of change. He wanted a Libya that belonged to its people, not to foreign powers. In school, he was quiet but sharp. Later, he joined the military, where his leadership skills began to shine. He started reading political books, especially those about Arab nationalism and socialism. The writings of Gamal Abdel Nasser, the Egyptian president, influenced him deeply. By his 20s, Gaddafi was already building a small group of loyal army officers. They called themselves the Free Officers Movement. Their mission? To overthrow the monarchy and give Libya back to its people. Even at a young age, Gaddafi showed signs of strong will and bold thinking. But no one could have imagined that this poor desert boy would one day become one of the most controversial and powerful leaders in the world. His journey was just beginning, and the world had no idea what was coming next. Chapter 2. The Coup. In the early morning hours of September 1st, 1969, everything changed in Libya. While King Idris was away in Turkey for medical treatment, a bold and bloodless military coup unfolded. The mastermind? A 27-year-old army captain named Muammar Gaddafi. Alongside a small group of junior officers from the Free Officers Movement, Gaddafi took control of key government buildings, radio stations, and military bases in Tripoli and Benghazi. The operation was swift, efficient, and without violence. By sunrise, the monarchy had fallen, and a new chapter had begun. The news shocked the world. How could someone so young, so unknown, take down a king without firing a single shot? But, to the Libyan people, Gaddafi's message was powerful. He didn't declare himself president. He said, "I am a servant of the people. I don't want power. I want justice." In his early speeches, He promised a future of dignity, equality, and independence. He called for the removal of foreign military bases. He expelled foreign oil companies that were exploiting Libyan resources. He said, "Our oil is for our people." For the first time, ordinary Libyans felt heard. They felt seen. Hope returned to the streets. Gaddafi's charisma was undeniable. He wore a plain military uniform. He refused to sit on thrones or be called "Your Excellency." Instead, he said he was one of them, a man of the people. He abolished the constitution, dissolved parliament, and began building what he called a direct democracy. But behind the charm and idealism, a different plan was taking shape. Muammar Gaddafi wasn't just a revolutionary. He was a strategist. And slowly, he was laying the foundation. Not just to change Libya, but to control it completely. The revolution was over. The real power had just begun. Chapter 3. The Golden Years. After the 1969 coup, Libya entered a period many would later call the Golden Years. The young revolutionary, Muammar Gaddafi, now had complete control, and at first he used it to bring real change. One of his earliest moves was to nationalize the oil industry. Before Gaddafi, most of Libya's oil profits went to Western companies. Now, the wealth of Libya would flow directly to its people. With billions pouring in, Gaddafi began reshaping the nation. He invested heavily in infrastructure. Desert roads were paved. Schools and hospitals were built. Electricity reached remote villages. Clean water became more accessible. Education and health care became free. Libyans who had never imagined going to school were now earning degrees. Medical services that were once out of reach were suddenly available to everyone. Gaddafi also created housing programs. Newly married couples were gifted homes. Loans were interest-free. Even electricity was provided at no cost. In just a few years, Libya's standard of living soared. The United Nations reported that Libya had the highest Human Development Index in Africa. Poverty dropped. Literacy rose. To many, Gaddafi looked like the hero he had promised to be. But he wanted more than economic reform. He wanted to create a new political system, one that would replace capitalism, communism, and monarchy. He called it the Third Universal Theory and explained it in his famous Green Book. The book rejected traditional democracy and proposed a system of people's congresses and popular committees. Gaddafi said this was true democracy, where every citizen had a voice. But in reality, the system gave him even more control. No elections, no opposition, only his ideas, his philosophy, his power. Still, during these years, many Libyans supported him. He was giving them dignity, wealth, national pride. They saw him as the leader who stood up to the West, and won. But while the outside looked golden, the cracks were quietly beginning to form beneath the surface. Chapter 4. The Shadows Begin. As Libya prospered under Muammar Gaddafi's rule, a silent shift began to take place, one that would slowly change him from a revolutionary hero into a feared dictator. With absolute power in his hands, Gaddafi grew increasingly suspicious of anyone who disagreed with him. He claimed to be building a system of direct democracy, but in reality, he was eliminating all forms of dissent. There were no elections, no free press, no opposition parties. Only Gaddafi, his Green Book, and the People's Committees he controlled. He established a vast network of secret police and surveillance teams. Neighbors were paid to report on neighbors. Families turned against each other. The fear of being labeled a traitor was enough to keep most mouths shut. Those who spoke out were arrested, tortured, or disappeared without explanation. Prisons like Abu Salim became symbols of horror, where political prisoners were kept for years without trial. In 1996, over 1,200 inmates were killed in a single day during a prison massacre. The world hardly heard about it, because in Gaddafi's Libya, the truth was buried deep. At the same time, Gaddafi's behavior started becoming more erratic. He traveled with female bodyguards, wore flashy robes, and set up tents in the middle of foreign capitals during state visits. He began delivering long, rambling speeches, often with no clear point. The leader who once promised equality and dignity was now feared more than loved. He surrounded himself with loyalists and silenced even the smallest voices of opposition. Yet, he still saw himself as the guardian of his people, the only one capable of guiding Libya. He believed the nation would fall into chaos without him. And maybe that fear is what kept him going. The fear of losing control. The fear of becoming irrelevant. So he tightened his grip, convinced that only he could hold the country together. But in trying to protect his power, he began to destroy the very dream he once fought for. Chapter 5. Enemy of the West. As Gaddafi tightened his grip at home, he began turning his focus outward, toward the world stage. He no longer wanted to be just the leader of Libya. He wanted to be a global revolutionary, a symbol of resistance against Western imperialism. He openly criticized the United States, the United Kingdom, and their allies. He accused them of exploiting Africa, destabilizing the Middle East, and treating weaker nations like puppets. Gaddafi positioned himself as the voice of the oppressed, funding liberation movements across Africa and even in parts of Europe and Latin America. But with that ambition came danger. In the 1980s, the West began to view Gaddafi as a major threat. His government was accused of sponsoring international terrorism. Most notably, he was linked to the bombing of a Berlin nightclub in 1986, which killed 3 people, including 2 American soldiers. In response, the United States launched a direct airstrike on Tripoli and Benghazi. The operation, named El Dorado Canyon, was approved by President Ronald Reagan. Gaddafi survived the attack, but his adopted daughter, Hannah, was killed. His home was destroyed. From that moment, his hatred for the West became personal. 2 years later, in 1988, tragedy struck again. Pan Am Flight 103 exploded over Lockerbie, Scotland, killing 270 people. Investigations pointed toward Libyan agents. Global outrage followed. Sanctions were imposed. Libya became isolated, economically, politically, and diplomatically. The pressure mounted. The economy weakened. But Gaddafi refused to back down. For over a decade, Libya was branded a rogue state, its leader, a villain on the world stage. But in 2003, the world was stunned. Gaddafi made a dramatic shift. He announced that Libya would give up all weapons of mass destruction. He wanted to reopen Libya's doors to the international community. It was a rare moment of diplomacy, but the damage had been done. Though relations improved temporarily, the world would never fully trust him again. And behind the curtain, Gaddafi knew. His real enemies weren't just abroad. They were growing inside his own country. Chapter 6. The Fall. By 2011, Muammar Gaddafi had ruled Libya for over 4 decades. To the outside world, he was still the bold, unpredictable figure, stubborn, eccentric, and unyielding. But within Libya, something was changing. The fear that once kept people silent was fading, and the world itself was on fire. The Arab Spring had begun. In Tunisia, a street vendor set himself on fire, sparking a wave of protests across the Middle East. Dictators were falling, people were rising, and soon the fire reached Libya. It started in Benghazi. Peaceful protests broke out, demanding reforms, dignity, and freedom. But Gaddafi didn't see protesters. He saw traitors. He called them rats, cockroaches, and enemies of the state. He ordered his security forces to crush the movement with brutal force. Snipers shot protesters. Tanks rolled into cities. Civilians were bombed from the air. The world watched in horror. As the violence escalated, the international community stepped in. NATO launched a military intervention to protect civilians. Foreign airstrikes targeted Gaddafi's forces, weakening his grip on the country. Libya was now a war zone, split between those loyal to Gaddafi and those who wanted him gone. In the final months, Gaddafi was no longer the ruler of Libya. He was a fugitive, moving from town to town, hiding in tunnels, living in fear. On October 20th, 2011, in his hometown of Sirte, Gaddafi's convoy was bombed by NATO. He fled on foot, hiding in a drainage pipe. Rebel fighters found him, bloodied, disoriented, pleading for his life. But mercy was not given. He was beaten, humiliated, shot. The footage spread across the world. A once mighty leader, dragged through the dirt, begging for forgiveness. The man who ruled Libya for 42 years died in chaos, alone, powerless. It was the end of an era, and the beginning of something far more uncertain. Chapter 7. Legacy and Regret. The death of Muammar Gaddafi marked the end of one of the longest and most controversial rules in modern history. But while the man was gone, his shadow remained, deeply etched into Libya's soil. In the immediate days after his fall, there were cheers in the streets. People celebrated. The dictator was no more. Freedom had arrived, or so it seemed. But freedom, without structure, is fragile. And Libya, without Gaddafi, was like a body without a spine. Multiple factions rose to power. Tribal wars broke out. Militias seized cities. Weapons flooded the streets. The once oil-rich, stable country collapsed into chaos. Hospitals ran out of supplies. Electricity became unreliable. Schools were shut. Terrorist groups began to take root in the vacuum left behind. Many Libyans, who once prayed for Gaddafi's end, now began to ask, were we better off with him or without him? That question haunts Libya to this day. Gaddafi's legacy is one of deep contradiction. He gave his people free homes, health care, and education, benefits many nations still struggle to provide. He elevated Libya's position on the world stage. He challenged Western power. Yet, he ruled with fear. He denied basic freedoms. He silenced opposition with violence. To some, he was a revolutionary who fought for African unity and independence. To others, a ruthless tyrant who destroyed what he built. In the end, his dream of a united Libya died with him. His green book faded into history, and the question remained, was his rule a golden age or just a golden cage? History, as always, will debate. But the people who lived through it carry the answer in their scars. Muammar Gaddafi's story is not just about politics. It's a story about power, pride, vision, and ultimately, downfall. He rose from nothing, from a desert tent with no title or wealth, and built a nation that stood tall in Africa. He gave free homes, education, and medical care. He stood against foreign influence, spoke for African unity, and dreamed of independence. But in chasing greatness, he forgot to listen. He silenced voices, ruled through fear, and in the end, the very people he once called his own were the ones who turned against him. His rise teaches us that bold vision can change the world. His fall reminds us that without humility, power always destroys itself. As we look back on his life, we don't just study a man. We study a mirror of human nature, ambition, and the cost of control. If you found this story powerful and thought-provoking, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more deep, meaningful stories like this one. Thank you for watching. Until next time, take care of yourself, stay curious, and goodbye.